They say the Imperial Palace holds 1,000 secrets behind vermilion walls, but nobody suspected mine. My name is Celeste, and I am the Empress of the Eastern Kingdom. The night I found my husband, Emperor Darius, wrapped in my younger sister's embrace on our wedding anniversary, I didn't scream or weep. I simply smiled, turned away, and began orchestrating the most calculated revenge the Imperial court would ever witness. You see, most women in my position would have confronted them right there, maybe caused a scene worthy of palace gossip for decades. But I learned long ago that in the dangerous game of court politics, the person who reacts emotionally loses everything. Instead, I would make them all dance like puppets on strings. My husband, my sister, and every beautiful woman I was about to bring into this palace. This is the story of how I, a woman everyone dismissed as the dutiful wife, dismantled an emperor's world piece by piece without ever raising my voice. And the sweetest part? They praised me as a saint until the very last moment. Before we continue, if you're new to Lotus Tale Studios, hit that subscribe button because you won't want to miss our entertaining stories. The harvest moon hung in the sky like a lantern the night everything changed. I had been empress for exactly 3 years when my world shattered and reformed into something sharper, something dangerous. I remember the whisper of my silk gown as I moved through the pavilion of harmonious dreams, carrying a porcelain box of jasmine tea cakes I had spent all afternoon preparing. A surprise for Darius on our anniversary. The palace attendants had offered to deliver it, but I insisted on taking it myself. I wanted this moment to be special, intimate. How foolish I was then, still believing in the fairy tale they sell young girls about love conquering all. Darius had told me he would be in the strategy chamber until past midnight, reviewing military reports with his war council. But as I approached his private meditation room, I heard laughter. Not his usual controlled chuckle, but something warmer, more alive than anything he had shared with me in months. Through the rice paper door, I saw their silhouettes merged together. My younger sister, Lyanna, the one I had invited to the palace to keep me company in this lonely place, was in his arms. Her head tilted back in complete abandon, and he gazed at her with an intensity he had never once directed at me, not even during our wedding ceremony. "My golden flame," he murmured to her, using an endearment that cut deeper than any blade. "Once Celeste gives me an heir, we can stop hiding. I'll elevate you to Imperial consort, perhaps even make you second empress if the council agrees." Lyanna's laugh was like glass breaking. Poor perfect Celeste, always trying so hard to be everything you need. She has no idea you slip into my chambers every night after you leave her bed cold and empty. "She serves her purpose," Darius replied, his fingers tracing my sister's cheek. "The Prime Minister's daughter with all those military alliances her family controls. Our marriage was a strategic necessity. But you, my darling, you are the choice of my heart." The porcelain box slipped from my numb hands, tea cakes scattering across the stone pathway. But instead of bursting through that door, instead of giving them the dramatic confrontation they might have expected, I knelt down and carefully gathered every broken piece. My mind was already working, turning, planning. I walked calmly back to my chambers and summoned my most trusted lady in waiting, Mai. She had served my mother before me, and her loyalty was beyond question. "Your Majesty," she gasped when she saw my face. What happened? I sat at my lacquered desk, my hands perfectly steady as I began making lists. "Mai, I need you to do something important. I need you to help me find the most extraordinary women in the Empire. Dancers, scholars, merchants' daughters. But not just beautiful. I need them intelligent, ambitious, and most importantly, capable of bearing children." She looked confused. "But Your Majesty, why would you?" "The Emperor works too hard," I said smoothly, my voice revealing nothing. "As his devoted wife, I believe he deserves more joy in his life. A man of his position shouldn't be limited to one woman. Don't you agree?" Within 8 weeks, I had gathered them. 40 of the most remarkable women the Empire had ever seen. Each one carefully selected not just for beauty, but for specific qualities that would serve my greater purpose. There was Jade, a merchant's daughter who could calculate complex mathematics faster than the Imperial treasurer. Lotus, a dancer whose mother had given birth to 11 healthy children. Willow, a poet whose words could make grown men weep. And then there was my masterpiece, Isabella. The daughter of a Western ambassador, trained in sophisticated arts since childhood, with hair like spun gold and eyes the color of a frozen lake. I presented them to Darius during the Spring Blossom Festival when the entire court was assembled as witnesses. My beloved Emperor, I announced clearly so everyone could hear. I have failed in my duties as your Empress. The Imperial household has too few consorts, and you have only 2 sons from your previous ladies. I have personally selected 40 exceptional women to bring you happiness and ensure our dynasty continues strong. The court went silent. You could have heard a flower petal drop. The Empress Dowager, Darius's mother, nearly spilled her tea. Darius himself looked stunned, his eyes darting between me and Lyanna, who had gone as pale as rice powder. My dear Empress, he said carefully, clearly trying to understand my game. This is very unexpected. I smiled, the picture of wifely devotion. Your happiness is all that matters to me, Your Majesty. And surely my dear sister Lyanna would agree that you deserve every pleasure the Empire can provide. Lyanna's forced smile looked painful. Of course, sister. How very thoughtful of you. The Empress Dowager, recovering quickly, actually applauded. Finally, an empress who understands tradition. Not like these modern women who cling possessively to their husbands. Celeste, you honor your position beautifully. And so my plan began. I placed each consort strategically throughout the palace grounds. The musicians near the Emperor's morning pavilion where their practice sessions would wake him at dawn. The dancers near his study where their rehearsals would interrupt his concentration. The poets in the garden he used for secret meetings with Liona. But Isabella, I placed her in the Lotus pavilion, positioned directly between the Emperor's quarters and Lyona's residence. You understand what I need from you? I asked her privately, offering tea from my personal collection. Isabella's knowing smile was sharp as a dagger. Perfectly, Your Majesty. The Emperor will forget every other woman exists, including your sister. You have my absolute word. I don't want him to forget her, I corrected. I want him to compare them constantly. I want her to fight desperately for his attention, and I want her to lose. Within 1 week, the palace transformed into beautiful chaos that appeared perfectly harmonious to outside observers. The Emperor, who previously spent 4 nights each week with Liona, now found himself surrounded by exceptional women at every turn. Lotus would accidentally cross his path during morning walks, her silk robes clinging perfectly to her graceful form as she practiced exercises. Willow would recite poetry beneath his window, her verses growing more sensual each passing day. Jade would arrive with financial reports, her brilliant mind making state discussions unexpectedly stimulating. Isabella did nothing obvious. She simply existed like a golden statue in a temple, always visible but never approaching, driving him slowly mad with curiosity. Your Majesty, my reported one evening, barely hiding her amusement. The Emperor visited 7 different consorts last night. He started drinking special energy tonics. I was embroidering a phoenix, Lyona's pet name from Darius, but in my version the phoenix was trapped in thorns, unable to rise. And my sister, Lady Liona, has tried visiting him for 4 days straight. Each time she finds another consort already there. Yesterday she actually threw a vase at Lady Lotus. How unfortunate, I murmured. Please compensate Lady Lotus generously for her distress. And send my sister some calming tea. She seems stressed. 4 months into my plan, I made my next calculated move. I summoned the court's most respected physician, not for myself, but publicly, with great concern for the Emperor's well-being. Dr. Lin, I said in front of the entire court including the Empress Dowager. I fear for His Majesty's health. He appears exhausted, his color is poor. Perhaps the burden of governing our vast empire is overwhelming him. The physician examined Darius and looked troubled. Your Majesty works far too hard. He needs proper rest, better nutrition, and he paused delicately, moderation in all aspects of life. Then we must ensure he receives the best care possible, I declared. I will personally oversee his meals and medicine. And perhaps, I added, glancing at the 40 consorts who had gathered, we should establish a proper schedule. For his health, naturally. The Empress Dowager nodded vigorously. Very wise. In my time, There were strict rules about such matters. No emperor should exhaust himself on earthly pleasures when he has an empire to govern. I created a rotation system, mathematical in its precision, seemingly fair in its distribution. Each consort would have one appointed night per month with rest days between. But here's what nobody knew. I controlled the palace kitchens completely, and each consort's meal before their scheduled night contained special herbs. Nothing harmful, just natural ingredients that depleted energy and dampened passion. All except Isabella. Her meals were enhanced with ingredients that would make her absolutely irresistible. Lyanna, not being an official consort, wasn't included in any schedule at all. "This is ridiculous," she confronted me in my garden one afternoon, her careful composure finally cracking. "You know exactly what I mean to him." I looked up from arranging flowers, my expression innocent. "You're my beloved sister whom I brought here as my companion. Are you claiming to be something else?" Her face flushed red. "You know perfectly well what we are." "I know nothing," I interrupted smoothly. "Except that the emperor needs structure and discipline. If you have concerns, perhaps you should discuss them with the Empress Dowager. I'm certain she would be fascinated to hear why you believe you deserve special treatment." She stormed away, and I returned calmly to my flowers. The white chrysanthemums I was arranging were traditionally used for funerals, but she didn't need to know that detail yet. Jade conceived first, the brilliant merchant's daughter. When she announced her pregnancy, I showered her with expensive gifts and moved her to the second finest pavilion in the palace, one with a perfect view directly into Lyanna's quarters. "Your Majesty is too generous," Jade said, kneeling before me. "I don't deserve such honor." "Nonsense," I replied, helping her stand. "You carry the Emperor's child. You deserve every comfort. If you need anything at all, you need only ask." What Jade didn't realize was that I had selected her specifically for this exact role. Her pregnancy would be the first domino in a long line waiting to fall. Within 6 weeks, 4 more consorts announced pregnancies. The palace exploded with celebration. The Empress Dowager was beside herself with joy, praising my wisdom constantly. 40 consorts and already 5 carrying Imperial heirs, she exclaimed at a palace banquet. "Celeste, you truly are the mother of our nation, even without bearing children yourself yet." I accepted the praise with humble grace, while across the banquet hall Liona stabbed at her food viciously. Darius meanwhile looked increasingly worn down. The energy tonics I had been providing him contained tiny, carefully measured amounts of mercury. Not enough to kill him quickly, just enough to slowly poison his vitality over time. "My dear husband," I said sweetly, approaching with another cup of tonic. "You look so tired. Perhaps you should rest tonight instead." He grabbed the tonic desperately. "I can't. Isabella is scheduled for tonight, and he paused, his eyes glazing over with desire. "She's been learning special techniques from the Western lands." I hid my smile behind my sleeve. Isabella had indeed been receiving training from a courtesan I had hired from the southern kingdoms. One who knew arts that could make a man forget his own identity. "Then you must maintain your strength," I said, watching him drink the poison disguised as medicine. Lyanna was nothing if not resourceful. When she realized she was steadily losing the Emperor's attention, she took matters into her own hands. She began spreading vicious rumors about the consorts. Whispers of infidelity, suggestions of witchcraft, hints of poison plots. But I had anticipated this move completely. Every consort had been instructed to report directly to me if they heard anything suspicious. When the rumors reached me, I called a public assembly. "It has come to my attention," I announced to the gathered court, "that someone is spreading terrible lies about the Emperor's consorts. These women are under my personal protection. An attack on them is an attack on me, and therefore an attack on the Imperial family itself." I let my gaze rest on Lyanna for just one meaningful moment. I'm sure it's merely bored palace servants with too much idle time. But should I discover the actual source, the consequences will be extremely severe. The Empress Dowager nodded forcefully. "Anyone who threatens the Emperor's unborn heirs deserves the harshest punishment available. These consorts carry the future of our entire dynasty." Lyanna had no choice but to nod along, trapped completely by her own schemes. But she wasn't finished fighting. That night, She attempted to sneak into Darius's private chambers, wearing the same robe she had worn the night I discovered them together. What she didn't know was that I had stationed guards specifically for the Emperor's protection, naturally. Lady Lyanna, the guard said loudly, ensuring everyone within hearing distance noticed. The Emperor is not receiving any visitors outside the official schedule. Please return to your quarters immediately. I'm the Empress's sister, she protested desperately. Which is exactly why we must be especially careful, the guard replied firmly. The Empress would be devastated if anyone questioned your honor by seeing you visit the Emperor's chambers late at night. By the next morning, the entire palace buzzed with gossip. The Empress's own sister trying to sneak into the Emperor's bed. How shameful. How utterly desperate. I found Lyanna weeping in her room later that day. Sister, I said gently, sitting beside her on the cushions. You seem very troubled. Perhaps a visit home would help. Mother misses you terribly. You orchestrated all of this, she whispered, her eyes red and swollen from tears and rage. Every single piece. I tilted my head, pretending confusion. Orchestrated what exactly? I've only tried to ensure the Emperor's happiness and secure our dynasty's future. If you're unhappy here, nobody is forcing you to remain. She looked at me then, truly looked at me, and I saw the exact moment she realized she had underestimated me from the very beginning. Celeste, please. I love him. Love, I laughed, the sound like cracking ice. You loved the power he represented. You loved being chosen over me, your supposedly perfect sister. You loved the secret thrill of betraying your own blood. That's not love, Liona. That's pure greed. 7 months into my plan, Isabella had become Darius's complete obsession. He spent every available moment trying to earn more time with her, offering jewelry, titles, extravagant promises. But following my instructions, she remained tantalizingly just out of reach. Your Majesty, she would say in public, her foreign accent making every word exotic and alluring. The Empress has been so incredibly kind to me. I couldn't possibly accept more than my assigned time. It wouldn't be proper or respectful. This drove him to absolute distraction. An emperor, the most powerful man in our entire realm, being politely denied by a mere consort. Unable to force the issue without appearing like a tyrant to his court. He actually came to me, came to his own wife, to beg for help. Celeste, he said, looking more pathetic than Imperial. Isabella respects you above everyone. If you were to suggest she spend more time with me, I pretended to consider thoughtfully. But husband, what about the other consorts? They're already jealous of the obvious favor you show her. And poor Lyanna has been so depressed lately. As her sister, I worry that showing even more favoritism to Isabella might push her over the edge entirely. His jaw clenched visibly at Lyanna's name. Lyanna is not my concern anymore. No. I raised an eyebrow. How remarkably fast affections change. I remember clearly when you called her your golden flame, your true love. Now suddenly she's not your concern? He had the grace to look ashamed, but only briefly. That was an error. A moment of weakness I regret. And Isabella? I pressed. Is she also just a moment of weakness? She's different, he insisted stubbornly. She understands me, challenges me intellectually. Makes you wait, I finished for him. Makes you work desperately for her attention. Unlike my sister who threw herself at you so readily that it became boring. The truth of it hit him like a physical slap. I watched him realize that his great passionate love affair with Lyanna had been nothing more than an easy conquest. And now he was completely enslaved by someone playing the identical game, but infinitely better. Please, he said again, and the Emperor of the Eastern Kingdom actually knelt before his own wife. I'm begging you. I let him kneel there for a full minute, letting the humiliation sink deep into his bones, before I helped him stand. I'll speak to her. But Darius, I used his personal name instead of his title. You should know that those energy tonics you've been taking religiously, they're slowly destroying your body. The physician warned me yesterday in private. You have perhaps 2 years, maybe 3 at most, if you stop immediately. His face drained of all color. What are you saying? The combination of the tonics and your excessive activities, I explained calmly. Your body is failing systematically. The physician suggests complete abstinence for at least 6 months if you want any chance of recovery. It was partially a lie, of course. The tonics were indeed poisoning him slowly, yes, but he had several years remaining, not merely 2 or 3. But fear is one of the most powerful motivators that exists. 6 months, he gasped, horrified. But Isabella will still be here when you recover, I said soothingly. If she truly cares for you as a person, she'll wait patiently. Won't she? The very next day, I arranged for the physician to speak privately with the Empress Dowager. Within mere hours, she had declared an official period of imperial abstinence. My son needs complete rest, she announced to the entire court. No consorts, no visits, absolutely nothing. His health and survival are paramount to everything else. Lyanna saw her opportunity immediately. If everyone was banned equally, she could claim fair treatment while attempting to sneak back into his affections through other means. But I had anticipated this move as well, naturally. Mother, I said to the Empress Dowager, loud enough for others nearby to hear clearly. I'm growing concerned about Lyanna. She seems unusually attached to the Emperor. It's quite inappropriate for an unmarried woman to show such intense interest in her own brother-in-law. The Empress Dowager's eyes sharpened like daggers. She had always harbored suspicions about Lyanna, and now I was confirming her worst fears directly. You're absolutely right, she declared immediately. It's highly improper. Lyanna should be married without delay. I'll arrange matches with suitable nobles far from the capital. Lyanna went pale as death. Your Majesty, I'm devoted to serving my sister. Precisely why you need your own life and household, the Empress Dowager interrupted firmly. A woman your age, unmarried, lingering around the palace indefinitely. People talk. Reputations get destroyed. One by one over the following months, the consorts gave birth. 6 sons and 6 daughters in the first wave alone, 12 children total. Each child was officially registered under my name as their legal mother according to imperial law, making me the most powerful woman in the empire without having borne a single child myself. I treated each child as though they were my own flesh and blood, ensuring they received the finest education available, the best medical care, every advantage. The consorts, deeply grateful for my protection and generosity, became my most fiercely loyal supporters. Your Majesty, Lotus said one afternoon, her daughter playing at my feet. We all understand what you've done for us. You've given us security, status, children who will be recognized as legitimate princes and princesses. We are yours to command completely. I smiled, gently playing with the child's silky hair. All I ask is loyalty to me and to each other. We are far stronger united than we could ever be divided. Meanwhile, Darius grew steadily weaker. The enforced abstinence I had imposed was driving him toward madness, but his fear of death kept him obedient. He spent his days watching Isabella from a distance, writing poetry she never bothered to read, sending elaborate gifts she politely returned unopened. Why doesn't she love me? He asked me one night, delirious with fever from the mercury slowly accumulating throughout his system. Perhaps, I said, placing a cool silk cloth on his burning forehead, love isn't something you can command like troops or steal like territory. It must be freely given and earned. Like yours was, he laughed bitterly through his pain. You never loved me either. No, I admitted honestly. But I was completely honest about it from the beginning. We both knew our marriage was purely political. You're the one who promised fidelity in our vows and then broke it with my own sister. Serena, he mumbled, confused and feverish. My greatest mistake. No, I corrected him gently. Your greatest mistake was thinking women are possessions to be collected and displayed. Now look at yourself. Surrounded by beauty you cannot touch, power you cannot properly wield, dying slowly from your own excess and greed. Faced with marriage proposals flooding in constantly from the Empress Dowager's aggressive matchmaking efforts, Lyanna grew increasingly desperate. She attempted one final gambit. She publicly claimed to be pregnant with the Emperor's child. The court absolutely exploded in scandal. The Empress Dowager was furious beyond words. Darius was shocked and confused. And I was completely prepared and ready. Sister, I said publicly, my voice carrying clearly across the great hall for all to hear. This is wonderful news if true. When exactly did this blessed event occur? Surely you can tell us the specific date so we can properly calculate when the child is due. She stammered, suddenly realizing her terrible mistake. Any date she could give would be easily disproven. Either Darius had been with other consorts on that date, or he had been in the enforced abstinence period. I'm not completely certain of the exact date. Not certain? The Empress Dowager's voice was like thunder rolling across mountains. You claim to carry an imperial heir but cannot say when it was conceived. This is outrageous. I stepped forward, all gentle concern and sisterly worry. Perhaps my dear sister is confused and overwhelmed. The stress of all these marriage proposals. Dr. Lin, would you be willing to examine Lady Lyanna to confirm? The examination was conducted publicly, deliberately humiliating, and absolutely conclusive. She was not pregnant. She had never been pregnant. Lying about carrying the imperial heir is high treason, the Empress Dowager declared coldly. She should be executed immediately as an example. Please, I intervened, playing the role of loving, merciful sister. She's young and confused, not thinking clearly. Let her marry immediately and leave the capital. Exile is punishment enough for family. Lyanna looked at me with pure, undiluted hatred as guards escorted her away to prepare for immediate marriage to an elderly governor in the farthest province of the empire. You've won everything, she hissed at me privately before her departure. Congratulations. Won? I smiled coldly. This was never a competition or a game to me. You made it one when you decided my husband was a trophy to be stolen and flaunted. I simply showed you both the inevitable consequences of your selfish choices. With Lyanna gone forever and his health failing rapidly, Darius became a hollow shadow of his former self. The mighty emperor who had once commanded vast armies and seduced numerous women now spent his days shuffling slowly through the palace, watching life happen around him but no longer participating. The consorts, following my careful instructions, were kind but carefully distant. They would curtsy respectfully when they encountered him, politely inquire about his health, but never linger or engage deeply. Isabella was the cruelest, or perhaps the kindest depending on your perspective. She would sit in the garden where he could clearly see her, reading poetry or playing the zither. Always beautiful, always graceful, always completely unreachable. Why? He asked her once, having cornered her in the library pavilion. I could still give you everything imaginable. Your Majesty already has, she replied with perfect smoothness. The Empress has ensured I want for absolutely nothing. I have a beautiful healthy son, status, complete security. What more could I possibly need? Love, he suggested desperately, his voice cracking. My love. She laughed, the sound like silver bells in winter wind. Your Majesty, you don't actually love me. You love the idea of conquering me, of possessing me, just as you loved conquering the Empress's sister. But I'm not a territory to be claimed with force. I'm a person. She left him standing there alone, and I found him hours later, weeping over a book of ancient love poems, looking utterly broken. Come, I said gently, helping him to his unsteady feet. You need your medicine. He took the poison tonic without protest or question, too broken to care anymore about anything. As the seasons turned slowly and Darius grew progressively weaker, I decided it was finally time for complete truth. Not out of cruelty, but because I genuinely believed even he deserved to face his end with honesty and clarity. The tonics, I told him one quiet evening as autumn rain drummed steadily against the windows. They were never actually medicine. They've been poison from the very beginning. He looked at me, his once bright, commanding eyes now dull with sickness and acceptance. I know. I've known for months. That genuinely surprised me. Since when exactly? 4 months ago? Maybe 5. He coughed weakly, tiny specks of blood staining his embroidered silk handkerchief. I could have stopped taking them at any point. Could have exposed you publicly to the court. Why didn't you? I asked, genuinely curious. He was quiet for a long, heavy moment. Because I deserved it. Everything you did. The consorts, Isabella, Lyanna's exile, all of it. I deserved every bit of suffering. That's not the real reason you kept taking them, I observed carefully. A ghost of his old confident smile crossed his gaunt face. No. I kept taking them because at least this way you were still taking care of me somehow. Twisted as it is, your revenge required you to pay attention to me, think about me. More attention than you ever gave me as a simply loving wife. I would have been a devoted, loving wife, I said quietly, honestly. If you had been a faithful husband to me. Would you though? He challenged weakly. Or were we doomed from the very start? Two people forced into roles neither of us truly wanted, playing parts in a story someone else wrote. I considered this seriously. We'll never know now, will we? That possibility died the night you chose my sister over me. As Darius lay dying slowly over the following weeks, the question of succession arose prominently. We had 12 children between us, all legally mine under Imperial law, all potential heirs to the throne. The court was extremely nervous about the very real possibility of civil war. I called everyone to the throne room. Every consort, every child old enough to understand what was happening, the Empress Dowager, and the dying emperor himself, carried in on an elaborate palanquin. I have raised 12 children, I announced clearly to the assembled crowd. Each one precious to me, each one capable and intelligent. But an empire cannot have 12 emperors ruling simultaneously. The room held its collective breath, waiting. Therefore, I propose something completely unprecedented in our history. The throne will pass not to the eldest son automatically, but to the most worthy child regardless of birth order. Each prince will be tested rigorously in wisdom, in strength, in compassion for the people. The consorts will judge fairly, as will I, as will the Imperial Council. The next emperor will be chosen not by birth order or luck, but by genuine merit and capability. The court erupted immediately in heated discussion, but the Empress Dowager raised her hand sharply for silence. This is highly irregular, she said slowly, considering. But ultimately wise. Very wise indeed. The strongest and best will naturally rise to the top. Darius, from his palanquin, laughed. A horrible rattling, dying sound. Even now, even at the very end, you're thinking 10 steps ahead of everyone else. I inclined my head gracefully. The empire requires stability above all else. This ensures it for generations. What I didn't say aloud was that this also ensured the consorts' absolute loyalty to me forever. Their children's entire futures depended completely on my judgment and favor. They would support whatever decision I ultimately made without question. 3 days before Darius finally died, Isabella came to me with an unexpected request. Your Majesty, may I perform for the Emperor one final time? One last dance before he passes? I studied her carefully, searching for hidden motives. Why would you want to do this? Because despite everything that's happened, he is still my son's father. And because you asked me to break him completely, and I did exactly that. Perhaps offering a small kindness at the very end balances the scales somehow. Creates harmony from chaos. I granted permission, and that evening Isabella danced in the throne room before the entire court. She wore pure white, the traditional mourning colors, and her dance told a story. A phoenix that flew too close to the burning sun, burned its beautiful wings, and fell to earth. Only to be reborn humbler, wiser, and stronger than before. Darius wept openly through the entire performance, tears streaming down his wasted face. When the dance ended, he looked directly at me with complete clarity for the first time in months. The phoenix in her dance was Lyanna, wasn't it? The phoenix was you, I corrected him gently. Lyanna was the sun. Beautiful, bright, tempting, but ultimately destructive to anyone who got too close. And my rebirth? He asked weakly. Did I achieve that? That remains to be seen in how history remembers you, I replied honestly. He died that same night, peacefully in his sleep. His last words, whispered so faintly I almost missed them, were simply, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, I replied, holding his cold hand as he took his final breath. And I genuinely meant it. I did know. And in some strange way, I had forgiven him, even while destroying him. With Darius dead and buried with full imperial honors befitting his station, I stood as Empress Regent with absolute authority. The trials for succession would take several years to complete properly, Years during which I would rule completely, shaping the empire exactly as I envisioned it should be. The consorts became my official council of advisors, each contributing their unique talents. Jade handled all financial matters and trade. Lotus managed cultural affairs and festivals. Willow documented our history and maintained records. Isabella, surprisingly, requested permission to return to her distant homeland. "My work here is finished," she said simply, without emotion. "And I find I have absolutely no taste for power that was earned through deliberate destruction of others, even those who deserved it." I granted her leave with an extremely generous pension and my genuine, heartfelt thanks for her service. Lyanna wrote to me exactly once from her exile in that distant province. The letter was remarkably short and simple. "Sister, I heard news of Darius's death. I know you'll never forgive me for what I did, but I need you to understand something. I truly did love him. It wasn't only about winning or beating you. I genuinely loved him, and that love destroyed all three of us in different ways. I hope your revenge tastes as sweet as you imagined it would. I hope it was worth the cost." I burned the letter without responding or acknowledging it. Some wounds are meant to scar over and fade, not to heal cleanly. Years have passed now. I stand once again in the pavilion of harmonious dreams, the same place where this entire story began. The 12 children have grown into remarkable young adults, each demonstrating different impressive strengths and capabilities. Tomorrow, we begin the final trials that will determine who becomes the next emperor or empress. The consorts have become my closest allies and friends, bound together by shared experience and mutual benefit. Together we've transformed the empire in ways previous emperors never imagined. We've established schools specifically for girls throughout every province. Reformed marriage laws to protect women. Created sanctuaries for abandoned women and children. We've taken our collective pain and suffering and transformed it into genuine power, then used that power to ensure no woman ever suffers the way we did. Mai, now elderly and grey but still sharp as ever, stands beside me as she always has. "Your Majesty," she says quietly. "Do you ever regret it? Any of it?" I consider the question seriously, giving it the weight it deserves. Do I regret discovering the betrayal that night? Do I regret my elaborate revenge? Do I regret the lives that were lost and destroyed in my quest for justice? I regret, I say finally, carefully, that it was necessary at all. I regret that Darius and Lyanna's selfish choices forced my hand and set me on this path. But I absolutely don't regret taking complete control of my own fate and destiny. I refused to remain a victim. A young servant girl runs up breathlessly, bowing hastily. "Your Majesty, Prince Chen requests an audience. He has a detailed proposal about reforming the civil examination system to make it more fair." Prince Chen. Jade's son, brilliant like his mother, compassionate like the father Darius could have been if he had chosen differently all those years ago. "Send him in immediately," I command, then turn to Mai with a small, knowing smile. "I think we've found our next emperor." The garden blooms magnificently around us. Phoenixes and dragons painted on every available surface according to tradition. But hidden among them, if you know exactly where to look, are thorns painted in gleaming gold. Beautiful, deadly, and always victorious in the end. My name is Celeste, and I am the Empress who brought an empire to its knees with patience and strategy, then raised it up again stronger, wiser, and more just than before. They call me many things now. The virtuous Empress. The mother of the nation. The kingmaker. The wise regent. But in my heart, I know the simple truth. I am just a woman who absolutely refused to be a victim in her own story. Who refused to accept betrayal and humiliation as her fate. Who took terrible pain and transformed it into lasting change. And that, perhaps, is the greatest victory any person can achieve. Not revenge for its own sake, but transformation. Not destruction, but reconstruction. Not hatred, but justice. If this story moved you or made you think, don't forget to smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Lotus Tales Studios for more powerful stories that will change how you see the world. Drop a comment telling us what you thought and what story you want to hear next. Thank you so much for watching, and remember, you are never powerless in your own story. You always have choices, even when they're hard ones. Until next time.